I love 5e D&D, but there are a lot of great games out there. And our patron saint Gygax once said, "The secret we should never let the game masters know is that they don't need any rules." He was sort of kidding, but I think sometimes we GMs can become too zealous in our adherence to a particular rule set. I think it's fine to mix and match rules from different systems to find what works best at your table. And out of all the Steal These Rules videos I've done, some of them I use in my games, some I just present for the channel, so this video is sort of a greatest hits, or the ones I find the most useful, and stay tuned to the end for brand new content, which is my hot take opinion about what is the best game to play at your table. And please enjoy my hair journey over the last year. Channeling the true spirit of randomness, this is a simple way to let the dice make decisions for you. Don't know which way a binary choice should swing? Roll a die and let fate decide. In the Blades rules, it gives this example. The PCs instigate a war between two factions, then sit back and watch the fireworks. How does it turn out? Well, unless you have an in-world reason why, the answer would be one way or the other, such as one of those factions being much stronger than the other. A fortune roll is the way to go. As far as I'm concerned, this is the GM's absolute best friend. I use it all the time. There are three main benefits to letting the dice decide. 1. It saves your mental energy to spend on other things. 2. It's a way for the GM to embrace chaos and have more fun at the table by randomizing outcomes. And 3. It's often the most fair way to adjudicate events. Take, for example, the age-old question of which PC will the monster attack on its turn. There are a few ways to handle this. If that PC previously attacked the monster will naturally attack that PC back. Or the enemy might simply attack the nearest NPC. But if there's no good reason to choose one PC over another as the target, I assign a number value to each PC. Then I roll a die and the monster attacks whichever one the math rock lands on. It's the most fair way to do it. This is exactly how the fortune roll works. Take the decision-making process out of your hands and leave it up to the fates. Are you intimidated by the uncertainty of improv? This will give you more confidence. I adore this rule. Let's talk about the devil's bargain. Have you ever set a DC of 15, then watch the player roll a 14 and see the angst in their eyes when they realize how close they were to succeeding? What if I told you there was a way to let the PC succeed on that check while still getting to use your evil DM brain to add a complication to the scene? Introducing the devil's bargain. When a player gets close but doesn't meet a skill DC or an opponent's armor class, tell them you'll let them add 5 to the roll to retcon turn it into a success, but there will be a consequence for getting the bonus to the roll. You can tell them the consequence and then let them choose, or keep it a secret until after they say yes or no. Up to you. Or you could offer it before the roll in the form of advantage. Some examples. You miss on your sword attack. The devil's bargain is that the miss turns into a hit, but you will slip and end up prone after the attack. Or, when the rope bridge over the chasm snaps and now you're hanging and the PC fails the dex saving throw to climb up, let them turn it into a success, but the PC takes a level of exhaustion in the process. Or say you failed the stealth check to infiltrate a castle. The bargain undoes that failure, but now there are more guards ahead than the party had originally planned for. Next, let's talk about the concept of fronts. I absolutely love fronts and alluded to them in my Making a Killer Villain video. Put simply, it's what your villain or villains are doing to achieve their goals. The book says, a front is a collection of linked dangers, threats to the characters specifically, and to the people, places, and things the characters care about. Consider them an organizational tool as inspiration for present and future mayhem. In my villain video, I talked about giving your BBEG a 5-step plan. This is basically a front, and Dungeon World uses the awesomely named tactic of grim portents, which is what your villain will or would do if the heroes don't take action to foil their dastardly plans. Grim portents. That's so metal. It's probably best to describe this with an example. Let's say your BBEG is a dark wizard rising in power and intends to take over the region with magic and might. This is what Dungeon World calls a campaign front. Let's say one of the dangers associated with this front is that the wizard has sent a contingent of thugs to occupy a village to bleed it of resources and systematically kill off those capable of defending it. The grim portent is that if the PCs do nothing, the thugs will control the whole town within 7 days. Obviously, you should find a way to pass along this info to your PCs because they should have the option to intervene. Give them a chance to stop these grim portents from happening by tackling the individual dangers that make up this front. And so using these fronts is a way to manage your villain's goals and to-do list. And always consider it a work in progress, updating it after each session depending on what actions the PCs have taken. And if the players decide to take up a big side quest of something unrelated, start a new front to track it. And you better track it, or you'll find yourself juggling too many chainsaws at once, and then you're going to lose an arm. Hey, real quick, since I have you, could I get a like and subscribe below? It only takes a second, and it helps out a lot. Next is chases. I have expressed my dissatisfaction with how 5e does chases before on more than one occasion. It's just not a good system for action montages. But in Call of Cthulhu, there's a whole chapter dedicated to running them, which is awesome. But I want to highlight a couple of the coolest mechanics here. First up is this concept of locations. The book says that you think of your chases as an abstract series of sequential locations, and so you put a line of dots on a sheet of paper. Left dot is the starting point, farthest right dot is the final location. This is perfect for theater of the mind, so you can easily keep track. You don't have to know which exact future location is which dot in case the action is not going along a linear route. Like I said, it's abstract. That upcoming dot could be an alley, or the inside of a restaurant, or a section of highway, or whatever is logical for the scene. The GM just writes down which character is at which dot to track the distance between the two, and the remaining distance the escapee needs to cover to get away and end the chase. It's free-flowing and adaptable. Next are complications in the form of hazards and barriers, which you also write on the sheet with the dots. These are things at locations that could be used to slow down the PCs and/or the NPCs. Likely some sort of ability check or skill challenge is used to bypass the hazard or barrier. And what I like about all of this is the simplicity of it, so it can be run quickly to keep the sense of action at the table high. If you've ever found the 5e chase system lacking, then take a look at how Cthulhu does it. Next on our list is alignment. I've always had a love-hate relationship with alignment, and that I think it can be useful as a shorthand for monsters, but it can be problematic for PCs. I've always liked the theory that it's less of a personality than it is more like a political belief system or a religious belief. Your actions might not always line up with your beliefs, but it's just something you strive for. Shadowdark does away with naming good and evil and instead lists only lawful, neutral, and chaotic. And while good and evil are sort of implied in lawful and chaotic, it does give you a little bit more wiggle room in how this plays out at the table. And I suppose the rule I'm advising you to steal here from Shadowdark isn't a literal rule, but one that I'm more extrapolating. And that is, don't be a hard ass about alignment. If the player piloting a lawful good paladin decides to get a little bit rough during an interrogation with an NPC, just let it happen. And then during the next long rest, ask that player how their PC now feels about their previous actions. The contradiction between what it says on the character sheet versus the PC's actual behavior can lead to some really juicy nuggets of introspective roleplay. But you shut down that exploration the moment you say, that's against your alignment, so you can't do it. The number 6 item to steal here is the D6 Decider. I adore this little rule, and it's something I've been using in my home games for a long time. Whenever a thing could go either way, I often call for a luck check. A 1 to 3 is a bad result, a 4 to 6 is a good result. The example Shadowdark gives is to adjudicate whether or not a dropped torch goes out or stays lit. Not only is this handy for quickly settling a yes-no question that might otherwise slow down the pace of the game, it takes some of the weight and responsibility off the GM's shoulders. Absolutely, you should steal this and add it to your home game. Let's talk about the team concept. In Monster of the Week, you play as a group called Hunters, who could be monster slayers or monster detectives or some other group that deals with the supernatural in a non-supernatural world. Maybe you're part of a clandestine government organization or an ancient order that wants to protect some kind of magical power that the monsters covet. And I think you can absolutely drop this team concept into your D&D game, probably during your session 0 or in the group Discord chat or whatever chat you're having prior to launching your campaign. Why are you adventuring? What circumstances specifically brought the 4 or 5 or 6 of you together? What do you hope to accomplish as a group during your travels? Forgive the corporate buzzwords, but what are your group's core values and mission statement? Knowing this ahead of time can help you decide how to handle tough decisions when they come up. And it's very helpful for the GM to know what kinds of challenges to toss at you. And if you're running Theater of the Mind combat, you should absolutely steal how ICRPG measures distance. Everything is either near, close, far, or out of range. Close is melee range. Near is somewhere you could reach with your regular movement. Far would require a dash, and out of range is anything you can't reach on this turn. If you're running Theater of the Mind, don't mess around with feet distance. It's way too fiddly for you and your players to keep track of in your heads. ICRPG's generic distances are much easier to grasp and make sense in those situations. Number 6 on my list is about timers. This is similar to clocks that I covered in my Blades in the Dark video, but in ICRPG it's a little more systematic. In Blades, a clock could be a villain's 6-step plan or a 4-step plan that the scoundrels need to collect the 4 pieces of a robot they want to assemble or something like that. But timers in ICRPG are useful in turn-based scenarios. This is the bomb that's going to go off in 4 rounds, the escape hatch that closes in 2 rounds, the villain who is going to flee after round 5. Timers keep you on track by getting more stuff out of your head and onto paper or digital paper so you don't miss important events. And if you make a timer that you can show to your players, that's a great way to ratchet up the tension. When combat has already started and on initiative count 20, slats open in the walls and water starts to fill the room, that's scary. But when the GM also throws down a D4 on the number 1 and says, when this counts up to 4, you're all underwater, that's terrifying. Nothing in the world motivates players like running out of time. Sometimes I like to use these little guys for real-life timers. Like when the PCs are trying to persuade the Queen to help them with some quest. So I pull out a 3-minute hourglass, flip it over, and say, okay, you have 3 real-life minutes to change her mind. It definitely heightens the mood. Let's talk about your campaign theme. Your campaign's theme is the overarching story structure or the glue that holds it all together. For a new DM, this may all seem a little too lofty when you're just trying to make it from one session to the next. And you certainly don't need to know how everything fits together before you get going. It's often revealed based on the choices your players make. And when you're running a published adventure, all that is pretty much determined for you. But the 4th edition DMG offers a few options here to help you figure out the kind of campaign you want to run. We've got Dungeon of the Week, On a Mission, Ultimate Villain, World-Shaking Events, Unfolding Prophecy, and Divine Strife. Many of these are closely related and have lots of overlap, but let's dig in a little more to each one and find out how they could be useful to you. Dungeon of the Week is the most simple type of campaign to run. It's like the Law and Order of campaigns, where each session follows a formula and the world does not undergo massive shifts across the campaign. This is perfect if your party is playing some kind of fantasy detective agency, and each session, a new dame with great gams walks in asking for help. I once ran a version of this with WotC's Candlekeep Mysteries, which is 16 kind of related adventures set inside or connected to a great library. We made the party Candlekeep Cops, and for each one-shot session, they had to solve a new mystery related to a library book. The On a Mission campaign type is only slightly more interconnected, where the adventures are still episodic, but they're all working toward an ultimate goal. Using my Candlekeep Cops example, I could have had them working toward the ultimate goal of unlocking tombs deep underneath the Candlekeep itself. Then we have the Ultimate Villain type of campaign, where episodic adventures lead to a final confrontation with a big bad. The easiest comparison here is every Zelda game ever, where Link has to find all the pieces of the Triforce, or gather enough strength to wield the Master Sword. Only then can he become strong enough to face Ganon. And very closely related is the campaign type of world-shaking event. This is often part of the Ultimate Villain's plan. The bad guy has released a bunch of water elementals into the Underdark below an active volcano, and now it's destabilized and finna erupt and destroy the town near it. Or it could just be that unexplained earthquakes or hurricanes are wreaking havoc on some population. Regardless of the reason for the world-shaking event, it's up to the party to find out why it's happening and how to stop it all. The Unfolding Prophecy type of campaign is a flavor of either Ultimate Villain or world-shaking events. This is an explanation for why these things are happening. It was foretold. It's up to the PCs to interpret and solve the prophecy before the bad guy or bad events do it for them. I like to think of the video game The Last of Us as a twist on the unfolding prophecy genre. Ellie is immune to the infection, and so her blood is the one thing that can save humanity. Joel has to deliver her to the doctors to fulfill the prophecy. And finally, Divine Strife is a campaign related to the PCs getting caught up in a conflict that's initially above their pay grade, feuding gods, warring nations, etc. It's up to the players to pick a side and to help end the conflict. How does it help you to know this? Well, you won't often know exactly where your campaign will be in 5 or 10 sessions. It's helpful to be able to drop in hints of things to come. If you know the type of campaign you're running, then those long game bits of foreshadowing will pay off much better. Our third mechanic is about monster rolls, something Matt Colville and crew include in their monster manual alternatives. Giving monsters specific jobs in combat can make it feel really fleshed out and avoid that all the monsters run forward and swing their swords until they're out of hit points problem. The 4th edition lists these roles: Artillery, Brute, Controller, Lurker, Minion, Skirmisher, and Soldier. There's also Elites, Solos, and Leaders, but they're kind of a separate thing, so we're not going to talk about them. Artillery are the ranged combatants. They fire, then run for cover. When played effectively and in the right terrain, Goblins are actually a pretty tough opponent because they can hide as a bonus action on their turns. Shoot, then run away, focused on saving their own skins. Next, the Brute. This is your prototypical tank, the creatures designed to take the hits while giving cover for the artillery enemies. Brutes are the most likely to sacrifice their lives for their teammates. Then we have the Controller enemies. These are the creatures who have the goal of manipulating the battlefield through area of effect spells, or doing things like positioning themselves to cut off escape routes. These are the more thinky enemies who usually stay back from the front lines. Next, the Lurker. This is your assassin, the one who can go invisible or spends a turn taking the long way around to strike the party from behind. Very deadly, and easy for the PCs to lose track of on the battlefield. Don't put these baddies up against low-level parties. Then we have the Minion. This is the cannon fodder and a monster type that's proved to be a little controversial over the years. If the party has good area of effect spells, like a wizard with a love of fireball, then giving them a group of goblins or kobolds to annihilate will make them feel all warm and fuzzy inside. But if you ask a fighter to spend 4 or 5 melee rounds cutting through that same number of goblins, it can feel like a drag. Just use them with caution, and consider letting more powerful PCs do cleave attacks to take down more than one at a time. Next we have the Skirmisher, tanky but less deadly than the Brute and with more mobility. These are the enemies who are determined to rush around the party's front line to attack the squishy sorcerer hiding in the back. Sort of like the Lurker, but more likely to engage in melee. Finally, we have the Soldier, which is a sort of combination of Brute, Controller, and Skirmisher. If your party is only fighting one monster type, the Soldier is the most versatile. They dish out the hits, provide cover, and try to prevent the party from running away. So how do you use all these types? For more complex and tougher battles, throwing a mix of enemies against your party is the key to challenge and fun. If you have artillery bandits with short bows, give them an orc brute up front to provide cover. If you have a couple of soldier types engaging the party, throw in a couple lurkers to use that distraction to attack from behind. If you're fighting in an area with natural choke points, use controllers to seal off the exits so the party can't escape. The party has roles in combat, so the monsters should also have roles, right? Skill challenges are an excellent way to force your players to use their creative muscles. They come from the 4th edition Dungeon Master's Guide, however I don't run them exactly how they are in that book. While the 4th edition does say that players can use whatever skills they want, it's a bit railroady in that it asks the DM to identify primary and non-primary skills and then penalizes players for using non-primary skills. That's dumb, just let players do whatever they want. Anyway, let's get into the specifics of the mechanics. First up, the goal and the context. Skill challenges can work in a situation where the scenario does not call for combat, but would necessitate more than a single roll to achieve success. Convincing the town guard to let you through the gate? That's a simple persuasion roll. But convincing an entire town full of people to rally to your side in a conflict? That could very well be a skill challenge. Other scenarios I like to use skill challenges for are things like chase scenes, mountain climbing, that kind of stuff. Chases are pretty poorly defined in 5th edition D&D and could use some help. They should be exciting like in the movies, right? It should involve more than just comparing movement speeds of two creatures to see if one can catch up to the other. So there we have a dozen killer rules to steal and adapt into your home game. Use some or all or whatever other rules you like. It's your game, your table, and no one can or should tell you that your game or rule set is inferior. No one gets to tell you how to have fun. Since you're here, can I ask you again for that like and subscribe? Until next time, this is GM Jim. Now go have fun your way.